October 24th, Nintendo released community tournament guidelines. These were put into place to help individual organizers run community tournaments specifically to how Nintendo wants them operating. This day was considered Doomsday for the Mario Kart, Splatoon, and Super Smash Bros. Communities. These are the largest competitive scenes from games produced by Nintendo that have continuously grown through the years. There was a lot of fear the players, spectators, and tournament organizers had while reading these guidelines, as they had to implement them into their very own online and in-person tournaments. Instead of reading them off though, giving you my opinion, I want to give you, the community, a sense of relief. Over the next 3 videos, I'll be interviewing 3 different tournament organizers that help run tournaments in the competitive scene, both online and in person. Today's video, we will be interviewing HoeenHero. Joining me on the line on the call right now, we have HoeenHero, who is the director of IPL, one of Splatoon's largest orgs that run many of the tournaments many of us in the competitive scene know and love, such as Lowink, SAC, SOS, Proving Grounds, and a handful of others. Hoenn, anything else I might have missed that you'd love to tell the amazing audience viewing this?
Not too much. You pretty much summarized what we run here at IPL right now, but yeah, we're always working to continue to improve the Splatoon scene through a variety of different means, but the biggest thing we do is our tournaments. That's for sure.
Obviously, we're going to start off right off the bat with the biggest thing is the main reaction to these guidelines, right? What was the main reaction for you and maybe other TOs that you were speaking with when these first dropped on what felt like the doomsday of Nintendo tournaments for you?
Yeah. So initially, right, it dropped. I initially saw a retweet of the Japanese tweet on Twitter. After a bit of fiddling and being able to translate it, we read through it and we're like, oh, this isn't great. But we're like, well, it's Japan, right? Nintendo Japan will sometimes have a lot of different rules. So I know tournaments are a lot more strict when it comes to prize pools and such there. It might just be that. So we kind of just shrugged it off and said, we'll just keep an eye on this. And if something else happens, we'll keep going. So, right, we just continue with our days as normal for a couple hours. There's a bit of chit chat, but nothing really. And then the EU guidelines dropped and suddenly everything got very, very serious very quickly.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we're pretty much like, yeah, this is going worldwide at this point.
Yeah.
It's possible they skip North America, but unlikely. So yeah, the initial reaction, right? At that point, I just skimmed through the Japanese one a bit, not really looked at it very much. At that point, I started seriously reading it. There was a lot of worry and fear in general, and some of that was amplified for a while, right? Because I constantly was getting interrupted by people, trying to ask questions and such, and I have to calm people down, right? Come on, it's gonna be okay, whatever it is, right? We'll figure it out. But once I did get some time to just sit down and read through the whole thing, right? And you got to look through it a couple times to really understand it.
Yeah.
Things did calm down quite a bit. There are parts of it that aren't great, right? Parts that concern us a lot, but it's not, the Splatoon scene is dead like a lot of the initial reactions that we saw on Twitter and such, where those are blatant overreactions.
Yeah, and I can't help but feel that I think it was overblown, right? The reaction that everyone had because, you see the words community tournament guidelines and all of a sudden it's like everyone stops breathing.
Yeah, I think some of that's definitely tied to how the Smash scene has had a lot of problems with Nintendo's in the past. We're like, oh no, here we go.
Yeah,
there's a lot of negative connotation with Nintendo and tournaments.
Exactly, and it couldn't help but feel like, this is it. This is the end. Like all this hard work that so many of us have put in, both on the multiple scenes, right? Not just Splatoon, obviously, but you have the Smash scene that's been growing for years. You have the Mario Kart scene that also has been booming. The different games that some players in certain categories and communities don't realize that this also affected was really just a lot. It was a lot to have to take in, a lot to process, a lot of bouncing around on pretty much Twitter and Discord servers of like going in like, what does this mean? Is this the end? And it's like, hold on a second. Let's breathe. Let us try to process that this is existing for a second.
Yeah, just gotta breathe, gotta take a look at it and look at it logically, right? Because panic doesn't help anyone,
Exactly. And
right?
yeah.
It's not gonna solve the problems, it's just gonna waste time and energy. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
speaking of looking at things logically, you did put out a Twitter post of you and a bunch of other head TOs of multiple organizations in a call
Mhm.
to discuss the guidelines, look them over. Do you feel that taking that time to have everyone come together just to really just understand what these guidelines were meaning and what they were going to do and the future of what was going to be many of these tournaments, both online and in person, like, do you think it helped doing that call and everything?
I think it helped immensely. The interesting thing about that call, though, it was completely impromptu. Well, mostly, anyways.
Hmm.
So initially, right, we were all trying to figure out what was going on, and I was, DMing people and receiving DMs from notable TOs throughout the scene as we try to work things out.
Yeah.
And there was the very start of the plans to have a TO roundtable, as I'm calling it. That was the name I was giving it, at least,
Yeah, yeah.
where we all basically get together and have a big discussion, right? But what we ended up doing, right, which was the roundtable effectively, was not planned at all. What happened was I was in the IPL staff server. We have a separate staff server due to how much is going on, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
too big to put in the public one,
Yeah.
right? And I was in there with Beta, who runs IDLE and helps with a lot of IPL stuff, right? They're part of the leadership team um, for IPL. And I was talking to him about what was going on as well, right? And in the TO guild where this all happened, we were talking amongst each other and talking to Alice, who is the head of Dapple's Productions,
Mhm.
right? And eventually Alice just said, I would like to talk with someone in a voice call because they were worried about it, right? Understandable. All of
Yeah.
us were
Yeah.
incredibly worried about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a voice channel in that server, so we had to ask the TO guild administrators, hey, can we have a voice channel? And after a bit of poking each other, because of course we're going to pull shenanigans, even in the middle of a crisis, because, I mean, come on, we've all been through it. We're going to have a little bit of fun. It's not like
Yeah.
this was extremely time sensitive anyways. We
Exactly.
knew that at this point, right? Um, we got the thing made, we hopped in, and then all sorts of people saw there was a voice call because they were watching the server and like, I'm gonna join that.
Yeah.
And that's and early on into the call, that's the picture I posted on Twitter. That actually brought in a lot of people, apparently. A lot of TOs
Wow.
saw that and joined it because of that,
Yeah.
apparently. The overall call size was more than like 3 or 4 times that size. There was a lot of
Oh
TOs.
my
In fact, to the
gosh.
point that I could not see everyone in the VC on screen at once. It was just too many people.
Yeah.
So it was an absolutely massive call, right? At that point, there was a lot of, what do we do? Panic, etc. There's a lot, not everyone had calmed down yet, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people hadn't seen it right away. There was a lot of panic even among the TOs. So step one was I had to tell people, guys, we got to calm down. That's not going to help.
Yeah.
Right, we get everyone in order. We get everyone sit down. The initial part of it, right, because it wasn't intended to be a roundtable at first, was a lot of just discussing possible impacts. Like I can't give you specific examples because I don't remember,
Yeah. No worries.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely though.
But it was a lot of, oh, what about this situation, right? Discussions like, oh, would the name Dapple's Productions be illegal under the guidelines? And we're like, no, we think that's okay because it's not a Nintendo character or game name, right?
Yeah.
Dapple Doolies is a weapon name.
Yep.
Same reason we're like, Inkling Performance Labs is probably okay because it's not the direct name of a character. But again, maybe Nintendo won't like that and we'll have to figure something out. We don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
All sorts of things like that. Yeah, so got everyone to calm down and answered a lot of questions. Big part of it was discussing with various people about various topics, some of which I can't share
No worries.
because I'm not sure if I can, honestly.
Yeah. That's fine.
But we had people, we were in contact like with the Smash Bros scenes, etc. This is a cross community problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was various ideas thrown around about that, but in the end, right, we all looked at it and said, okay, this is manageable. One way or another, we can handle this, right? Even the big thing came down to licensing, right? So,
Yeah.
one of the biggest initial worries is how do we get a license, right? There's no info about that. There's a Japanese form, but it might vary, and translating that's a bit hard. And historically, the Smash scene has had license for larger events. they've been really slow and hard to get.
Yeah.
That's historical, though. We don't know how it's going to be here, right? It's fast in Japan where it's available. But again, as mentioned at the beginning, Japan is Japan. It can be different than NA or EU. And based on what I'm hearing, right, I don't even know how acquainted NA or all of Nintendo of NA or EU are with the changes here. So I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how quick this will move. It might just be a lot of things not being properly organized, slowing it down. It might be fast. I really hope it's fast. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know there
But
was
in
a
the end,
lot.
we all looked at it. Go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say is that we all know how prominently dominant Splatoon is in Japan, right? Like it is one
Oh
of
yeah.
the largest franchises that has tournaments practically at every moment throughout the day, big and small. So to look at it from that perspective, it does make you think like, they kind of want to be fast because they want to have their scene continue to an extent while it's being, in a sense, managed. While for us over on the NA and EU side, even AU, because I know they got theirs a little bit after the US got ours.
Yeah.
It's, the scene's big, but I feel like it's not understood how truly big it is.
Yeah, Japan is honestly amazing to just think about the size of the scene over there. But unfortunately, there's such a language barrier. There's not really much of any interaction between the two scenes, and it's quite a logistical challenge to think about bridging that. But yeah, not really something I have a lot of experience in, so I can't really talk anything much about that. But back with the roundtable, right?
Yeah.
So we discussed a lot of different topics. A lot of what about this? What about this? What about this for my event? What about this in general, right? A lot of trying to help each other make sense of all of this so all of our events can continue operating. It very much was a full community effort, all hands on deck situation.
Yeah.
And the conclusion we came to initially was we're not going to die as a community. That's number one.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay because worst case, right? Worst case, we could continue to operate under guidelines. There might need to be changes. There might need to be significant changes to operate as a community tournament, but we can keep running events at the very least. So there will be tournaments. 2, right? The second thing we know is that we need more information. And unfortunately, there's not really a good way to just go to Nintendo and say, hey, can we have more information?
Yeah.
So we get to play the waiting game. Sure, we're trying to do what we can for reaching out to get that info, right? But it's not easy to say the least. So no guarantee we get anything. And even if we do get something right, that information very much could just be under lock and key because we just might not be at liberty to release it, right? Who knows? If we get info, we might be under NDA if that happens. But yeah.
Yeah, and if anything, like the information that does, because I mean, Nintendo, as we know, is one of the largest gaming companies in the world. Like they have so many titles and franchises that have such big and strong communities that sell record-breaking numbers almost every time they release a game for that franchise. So they have thousands of employees across the multiple different Nintendo ofs, America, Europe, Japan, etc., etc., etc. That it's so hard to pinpoint a person to contact or a group to contact to find an answer. And like you mentioned, if it does come to a point that someone finds somebody, there might be an NDA where you can't say what you find out. You just have to give the reassurance that everything's fine. Don't ask questions. Just know that everything is fine.
Yeah, that's unfortunately how NDAs work. I can confirm I'm not under one because I don't have any info.
Not yet.
Not yet. I mean, it would be nice to get some info, but nothing at this time.
Yeah, and hopefully that'll come along once we're in whatever point in November that Nintendo of America and EU is going to release the ability for licenses and just probably more information in general, because I want to say I doubt it's just going to be a case of, hey, just double check that guideline site again and just go scroll down to where it says for licenses and they just change it to an open link, right? But there's also the perspective of it's Nintendo. and they do that stuff. So it could just be refreshing. At one point, randomly in November, you could just apply for licenses on that page.
Me who just checked right now, it's not there.
One day, one of these days, coming
One,
soon.
yeah, no, it's not even November. Like
Yeah.
I didn't expect it, but I have the thing open in case I need to reference it here. So I'm like, I may as well take a look.
Yeah, can't hurt. So,
Yeah.
speaking of the
But
idea,
with the last thing with the roundtable, right? As mentioned, the whole thing boiled down to we need to wait.
yeah.
But we got a community that's on fire right now and is looking for leadership right now, right? We need to lead this community right now. We need to do our jobs as TOs, so let's do that. So I said, okay, let's draft a message.
Yeah.
And we talked about what we want that message to be, and the message we wanted to send to the community was, we're going to be okay, right? We'll get through this, whatever happens. We need to wait for more information, but whatever happens, we'll continue to have tournaments. Please, continue to support us. Feel free to express your thoughts on the situation because we're listening, right? That was the core of the message there. So we spent like 2 hours doing that. Mostly it was gathering logos from organizations to put on there because that takes some time, right? Because the organizations have to approve the message and then they could put their thing on there. And we did have some orgs that wanted to put theirs on there, but were a bit late or unavailable, like From the Ink Up comes to mind.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then I basically said, guys, I'm going to just at everyone in the IPL server with this. Can you all do that too? And that's probably why everyone is aware of the message.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was probably a good decision.
In a
I
sense-
apologize if the at everyone annoyed any of you. I try to keep them very, very infrequent.
And like
yeah.
that day when I think many of those watching who are in all of these servers can agree that it seeing all of those pings come from all of those servers, someone as myself who has even crossed the beyond the low level line or the super low level line, like still being in those servers and getting all of those pings, it really just showed that like we are one, right? Because I feel like some players or spectators even might have the perspective of, oh, there's so many different orgs, they're all doing their own thing, but there's so many other layers behind that we don't get to see. And the biggest thing I think of that comes to my mind right away is scheduling, right? When everyone has to schedule a tournament, you're making sure you're not stepping on toes. Like
Absolutely.
IPL is not going to.
It would have been pretty bad if IPL ran on 20XX, for example, but we have tools in place to prevent that.
Exactly. And I think this also really helps solidify that for a lot of people in the community, and that understanding that, hey, no matter what, we are all in unison in this together. We are all one. No matter what happens, we're going to be in contact with each other. We're going to keep things moving. As soon as something gets found out with whoever does an event somewhere, and if some kind of message comes and the Nintendo ninjas come knocking on your front door, or in the help desk, right? They come knocking in.
Oh my God, they're in the help desk. Oh man, that would be that would not be a good feeling.
Pinging in help desk, adding one of the mods.
Can we speak to a staff member? We're from Nintendo.
Yeah, that would be the most menacing message ever. But
yeah, no, the funny part is if that actually happened in one of our help desks, I would immediately assume they're a troll because I don't think Nintendo would come to our help desk to contact us.
That's
then
what
again,
say. You never know.
Maybe they would.
Yeah.
It usually is a troll in those kinds of situations. It's usually someone trying to be funny.
Exactly. And I guarantee we'll see that at least probably someone in some tournament is going to come on over and just say, you can't run your tournament right now. I am from Nintendo, or my dad's Nintendo.
Yeah, I would not be surprised, but I'm going to remind y'all to not troll in the IPL help desks because we don't appreciate that. We're trying to answer serious questions there.
Yeah, try to keep it clean, try to keep it to make sure whatever tournament might be going on, that it's running, and it's running smoothly. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? We want things to work even when they don't. So speaking on the topic of on these tournaments, right? And obviously people needing help and everything. So one of the questions I do have is that were there any, even whether you want to say speak of now or before the guidelines were fully read or both, Was there anything in these guidelines that you or any other TOs had a worry for when it came to running these online tournaments?
Yeah, there's definitely concerns we have about that, right? One thing to keep in mind first, though, is that these are designed for smaller events, right?
Yeah.
This is not designed for low ink, as an example.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing, regardless, because we don't have anything else at this very moment, right? At this moment, it's obey or, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
The participant cap.
Mhm.
The participant cap of 300 online players, participants, to be clear, that does not mean teams. A team has 4 players at minimum. So every team is 4 towards that cap at minimum. That is going to mess with the scene if we don't get licenses for our larger events. For example, we crunched some numbers trying to
Mhm.
figure out what we could do. SOS has posted an announcement related to this, but I was talking to the heads of SOS on Friday, right? We're trying to figure out, okay, what's our game plan? What's our immediate game plan? Because we don't know how long licensing will take, when it'll start. We might have to run events under community rules for a period of time, so we need to be ready
Yeah.
because otherwise we're not running events. So yeah, and I'm talking to like, okay, guys, you got 2 choices here. You got a normal cap of 64, but we have to implement a player cap of 300. So you could either do 64 teams as you normally do, in which case you need to limit it to no subs, 4 players per team, and then you'll have, oh, if I remember correctly, you have about 44 sub slots available. Design and create a system to allow players to try to fill that sub slot during the event or whenever you deem appropriate, right? I left that detail to them
Mhm.
to add them in any, and once all the slots are filled, you're done, right? Because once the event starts, if you are on a roster at some point, you're a participant, you can't unbecome a participant, so you can't just switch people around with TO help. If they're on your roster, they're staying on your roster,
Mhm.
right? So they decided to go with something similar to that. It's in SOS announcements if people are interested in it, right? They're working on something related to that. Not like every detail's not there, I don't believe, because I believe they're still working on some of those, but right.
Yeah.
The other thing I said, right, is okay, you could also do teams of 5, right? 1 sub, but you have to cap at 60 teams, no subs whatsoever at
Mhm.
all, right? Because that's 300 exactly.
Yeah.
Either way, right, that's pretty limiting. For SOS, it's not too big of a deal, but I could definitely see it hurting teams because you'll have teams that like to bring in like 6 players or 7 and occasionally 8, but usually no more than 6. Even teams that want to bring in 5 players, right? That's not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
5 players is pretty common. We can't because
Yeah.
Nintendo said so.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a big problem, right? So unfortunately, you're gonna have to decide which 4 play on a given night, depending on the situation, right? There's a few ways to move around that, but even if you're doing 5, right, you have to pick which 5 play on a given night. Um, and right, like one of the things I ended up doing for this whole situation was I went through and analyzed. I have a tool used for splash tag checking for low ink, of course, and it tells me how many players have valid tags and how many don't. Well, add those together, you get the total for the tournament, and it works for any of IPL's tournaments, so it can be flexible.
Mhm.
Yeah, I ran that for the most recent 4 events for all of our events, right? Um, so proving grounds, they're under the cap, they're fine. That makes sense.
Yeah.
SOS, usually over the cap. Again, that's gonna cause problems. Usually we have somewhere around 350 participants on a given weeknight.
Yeah.
Proving grounds, oh wait, I already mentioned them. SAC, excluding tournament 3, which I just listed at the time of calculating that, which was only 56. It's obviously more by this point because
Mhm.
it's finished. Also under the cap, but it varies. It got pretty close for Season 7 Tournament 4. But again, we'll see. I don't know. Something to keep an eye on, and even for tournaments like PG and SAC, right? They have to implement these rules still because they have to design their tournaments in such a way so that it's guaranteed we don't accidentally go over the cap.
Yeah.
We cannot have mistakes with this. Low ink is 3 to 4 times over the cap every single month.
And growing.
Yeah, 904, 1,171, 919, 931.
Man.
Most recent 4 events. Yeah, that is the logistical nightmare we're currently dealing with. Um, Not going to go into details, but we do have a plan for November,
Okay, cool. I
and
was
we
about
do
to
have a
ask.
plan long term.
Okay.
We're not going to go into details because we're still working out details
Which is
and we're
fine,
not
yeah.
ready to announce. But I don't know if we'll announce on November 1st for Low Ink, right? Because everything's kind of been messed up. If it was a normal one, yeah, of course we'd be announcing on November 1st as normal, unless we forget. Um, but yeah, again, participant cap is the biggest thing. So I'm gonna ask all of y'all, please be, understanding, work with us on these, because if it was our choice, they wouldn't put these, we wouldn't have this kind of cap in place,
Yeah.
right? This is not HoeenHero's being an asshole. This is Nintendo said we can't until we get a license,
Yep.
and we can't right now. Now, we might get one in time, right? But some of that's also, right, like let's say November, right? If we do, I don't, November Low Ink, for example, if things are different there, it might just be because, right, the license didn't come fast enough. Information on that didn't come fast enough, and
Yeah.
we have to have lead time on these things because we have a lot of stuff, especially for Low Ink. That's like the biggest tournament in the Western scene,
Hmm.
honestly. There's so much that goes on with logistics. Some of that you guys will be more familiar with in the future, hopefully, with something else I'm working on. But that's a thing for later. But either way, right? There's just so much going on with that. We have to have appropriate lead time to operate that event. And if we don't, then well, we'll probably be locked into one thing or another.
And
But
that,
yeah,
yeah, that kind of
um,
answered my next question as well, because that was gonna be like, what's the plan for licenses, right? Is
I do want to
everyone
come back to that question though,
okay?
because I do have some good points to bring up on that, on the why. Before that, I do have a couple other changes that were brought up that are more minor, right? The participant cap is the biggest thing for this
Oh,
community, though.
100%. Yeah.
That is easily the biggest limiter here. But there are some other points that have been brought up, fair points. Namely, the what is it going to take to get a license and when can we get one, which we've already discussed. The speed of obtaining one has also been brought up. And one other thing that was briefly mentioned is required changes to event branding, right?
Hmm.
So I'm scrolling through our wonderful guidelines here. I don't think they're like completely awful. That's a point I'll get to later as well. But the names of community tournaments may not contain Nintendo trademarks or IP, such as Nintendo's company name, logo, product, or service names, such as game titles, names adopted from Nintendo games, such as character names. This includes any shortened or modified use of Nintendo trademark or IP, right? So the big worry there is, of course, any required changes to event branding. Like, for example, SAC Splatoon Advanced Circuit is probably going to rebrand. We have things in the work for that. We're hopefully going to keep the S, so it's still SAC. It's just something else.
Yep.
But ideas are being thrown around. We'll see what happens with that. And then, of course, right, there's the question of, it's not a character, so like Dapple or Inkling is okay, but is it? That's up for Nintendo to decide, and we just don't know.
Yeah. It comes on to waiting for that
There's
one.
Yeah, and there's also like the argument, like there was also the argument brought up in like the TO roundtable. Oh, inkling is a word that doesn't just refer to the squid creatures, right? It also it's I could pull up the definition from Google, but it's an actual word as well.
Yeah.
So is dapple and all sorts of other things. A lot of the words we use are not unusual words, and the question becomes, can they say no? I mean, probably they could beat us in court any day.
Hmm.
But a better question, will they say
Yeah.
no?
Will they take that
And if
time
they
to
do, what if?
be a problem?
Yeah, yeah. Lastly, limits preventing income on events. So community tournaments have to be non-profit, right? You
Yeah.
can't take any amount of profit in. Now, that's somewhat problematic. So like taking IPL for an example. It's not so much that we pay staff or anything. Like that's a goal, right? That's one of the things we'd like to do. So having income is great for that because it makes it
Yeah.
possible. But some of the stuff, right? IPL is not free to run. We have expenses every month.
Yep.
We have servers we maintain and operate, all sorts of infrastructure subscriptions we need to make our production, give our production staff the tools they need to operate. It's not cheap, right?
Hmm.
It's so it all comes from Twitch ads and subscriptions and bits and YouTube memberships and ads, at least as of recent, and donations and all sorts of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, we're not pre this, we're not worried about going under or anything, like we're not in debt or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, a lot of that could be a lot of this stuff that I've mentioned could be chalked off as event expenses, right? But here's one of the big things, especially for high level. They like their prize pools.
Yeah.
I totally get that, right? And I'd
Yeah.
like to do more of those if possible. But here's the thing: to do a prize pool, that money has to come from somewhere. And if we can't make a profit, we can't run prize pools.
Yeah.
We can't. Where do you think that 500 from Super Jump came from? The initial 500 IPL put in the pot.
Hmm.
That came from y'all, subscribing, watching ads, etc. All that over the course of a year adds up to enough to cover expenses and do things like Super Jump and potentially more. So yeah, I appreciate the support from everyone on that. That's a big question because obviously whenever money's involved, it immediately becomes a lot more serious when it comes to legality. So we have a number of questions that aren't exactly answered on that. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I have a list somewhere. Um, but yeah. But yeah, you mentioned what was your question relating to license getting one, I believe?
For online tournaments, right? So obviously, like
Yeah.
you mentioned, you have a lot of tournaments that are ran by IPL that go beyond that cap and then some, right? So
Hmm.
is that currently? And I know there are some other TOs for other orgs that also have tournaments that probably run over the caps as well.
Yeah, more than
So
likely.
is that something that's going to be sought after? Are you or anyone else on the IPL staff or from any other production, right, for other orgs, are you aiming to apply for a license for certain tournaments as soon as they become available?
For other orgs, I can't really speak for them, right? There
Yeah,
was a little
obviously.
bit of discussion on that in the roundtable, but it was really too early to tell, so I don't really know.
Yeah,
And even if I did know, right, that's a private conversation. I'm going to let them speak for themselves on that
absolutely.
topic. But for IPL, I can, right? There's three perspectives that have been brought up to me on this.
Hmm.
Get a license, just do community tournament rules, which is, what we'd have to do if we don't get a license,
Yep.
or the proposal of go rogue, which has come up several times. Other people have suggested that to us. So, okay, let's start from the back. Why is 3 a horrible idea? Because okay, listen. Y'all do not want to mess with the Nintendo ninjas. You don't want
We
to play
don't.
with Nintendo's lawyers. They will beat you. Because first off, right? Let's say you just say I don't care what they do. They'll take you to court and they will win,
Yeah.
right? Even if they don't, even if you have a valid case and would have won that case, you don't have the money to beat Nintendo.
Yeah.
They're gonna bleed you dry, and you're gonna be out of money to defend yourself, and that is going to ruin the lives of IPL staff members because it's taking away their life savings too and everything else. It is not worth that over Splatoon. Now, obviously, that's an extreme case, right? Let's take it back a notch to the realistic thing if that path was taken.
Hmm.
Nintendo sends a cease and desist, and we cease and desist,
Yeah.
right? That's the reasonable path. Okay, right? Well, then you have to pick one or two. Well, out of those two, one would be more preferable for size. But guess what? If you just said middle finger to Nintendo, and they go off and then you apply to them, they're gonna be like, why would I give y'all a license? Y'all just said we don't. Y'all just basically badmouth us and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Y'all just said you hate us. No, we're not licensing you. Go away, and that could kill IPL. So no, it doesn't make sense to me to do that. Now, right, the Smash scene. I've seen a lot of vocal components within the Splatoon scene, especially those who have been in the Smash scene,
Hmm.
very vocal against Nintendo. I totally understand that. I get where you're coming from. Like I don't understand all the details because I'm not in the Smash scene,
Yeah.
but I have talked to appropriate parties, right? I'm not gonna go off and make big decisions without trying to make sure we're understanding the situation.
Yeah.
But even with that, right, the concern of don't work with Nintendo, the concern of Nintendo's not gonna care or whatever. I don't First off, that's a risk, as mentioned. I already mentioned what the bad outcome of that would be.
Yeah.
It's a big risk, in fact. Second off, this potentially could be a good thing, right? This license here. Actually, hold on, that was a point for later. You know what? I'll come back to that point.
Hmm.
I have notes for myself.
Love it.
But this could be a good thing, which I'll get to a bit later. So, looking at the remaining two options, get a license or just operate under guidelines starting November 15th. Obviously, point two is what we're forced to do right now until
Hmm.
further notice, but ideally, so that there's minimal impact on the scene, we get a license. Not to mention that can have benefits too. If we have a license to operate from Nintendo, Nintendo says, yes, you are allowed to operate. We are allowing you to operate. We're providing oversight, etc. That is actually a very good thing because it could get us, for example, sponsorships. It could help us fund more prize pools and do more things, pay staff, whatever we need to do, right?
Mhm.
Um, all sorts of different things could be done with that. So it could really be the start of something big for the Splatoon scene. It could actually help us grow quite a bit if it's played right. Um, and even if it turns out to be nothing, it doesn't help us. At the very least, it allows us to continue operating as is and continue to grow because with the community guidelines, that growth is capped. We're
Yeah.
beyond that cap. In fact, we have to cut ourselves back. That is going to cause long-term problems for the scene if we can't get license, I feel. So yeah, for me, for IPL, get a license is the obvious choice to me. And the big IPL leadership meeting on Friday, that's basically the conclusion we came to on that topic. We should have get licenses for our events after discussing all the different points in detail and different arguments brought up by different people, both within IPL and outside of it, right?
Yeah. I thought it would be an interesting point to bring up because I thought about it when I interviewed previously Magic because I wanted to get his aspect of like the local and land scene because he does help a lot with those.
Hmm.
We've seen the history that Smash Bros has had with Nintendo, right? I mean, they have
Hmm.
gone time and time again, fought them back and forth, and in a sense, Nintendo was like, they grew. Smash grew faster than Nintendo could catch it, right? And we
Yeah.
saw that. We saw it with history. We see it with its numbers it puts up, and it came to my mind that what if these guidelines were to prevent Splatoon, pretty much history repeating itself, Splatoon becoming what Smash Bros became, right? Because we were growing rapidly fast. It's been noted in the community by creators, tournament organizers, players. I mean, you name it. Like it has
Hmm.
been known that this scene has since Splatoon 3 has released has been growing rapidly in all over the world, not just NA and EU, and in Japan and
Yeah.
everything. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you feel about it, or the idea of, or seeing it from the perspective that, do you think that them putting these guidelines into place was not only just to, in a sense, manage, well, pretty much, yeah, to manage how quickly the Splatoon scene grows so it doesn't get out of hand like the Smash scene?
Depends on your definition of out of hand, like with the Smash scene. If um I think it's definitely there to manage the scene, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of the point of the guidelines based on what I'm reading.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's less of a they don't want us to grow, right? Because that's what I'm getting from the implication of what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. And more of a if we're gonna grow, they want to have some control over
Yeah.
that, namely to protect their IP. Because that's the big thing with Nintendo, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of complaints about fan games and such being taken down, and I don't like seeing that either, right?
Yeah.
But the big thing with Nintendo, their most valuable assets are their intellectual property, their IP.
Hmm.
Without their IP, they're nothing. If their IP, if they allow it to be used and abused, and not so much, I don't mean abuse, right? That's just a saying I say, but
Yeah.
if they allow it to just be used for whatever,
Hmm.
I don't remember the technical rules. I watched something on this a while ago, but it can get effectively released to the public domain. Nintendo, anyone could do anything they want with it.
Yeah.
If Mario, Splatoon, etc., just anyone could do anything they want with it, Nintendo's going to lose enormous amounts of money, and I mean enormous,
Yeah.
right? Sony, Microsoft, whoever, they could make Pokemon games, as a random example. Well, that's not directly Nintendo, but Mario games or Splatoon games or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Nintendo doesn't control it anymore in that case. And that, because that's their most valuable thing, right? Their IPs, that's basically the end of Nintendo.
Yeah.
Not exaggerating. So that's a big reason why Nintendo is so protective about their intellectual property. Trust me, I don't think they personally hate the concept of fan games or something like that,
Yeah.
right? I don't think they hate tournaments. They want to appropriately protect their IP so they remain in control with it so their company can continue to operate. So, yeah, and that's not all just automatically corporate greed. There's a lot of people who make their living working at Nintendo too, and they'd prefer to keep their jobs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, you definitely.
so that's a big thing there.
I was gonna say you definitely hit the nail on the head with that one, because that's exactly that is, and to confirm, yes, that's exactly what I meant. Right, is that they want to have some sense of control over their IP because we saw again. I say it like 3 times already. I'll say it again. We've seen how Smash has turned out. I mean, we're seeing record-breaking
Mhm.
numbers for streams on the of Smash tournaments, of participants, of spectators. Every time there's some kind of event going on, that God forbid another IP that Nintendo owned turned out like that, where now you have two very big IPs, one that has every character in your franchise, and another one that's just starting to grow a very huge competitive scene. It's a lot of people that you're gonna group in those communities that could, one day, who knows, group together and down with Nintendo in a sense, right? So it's a
Yeah,
scary thought, it's a scary sight, and seeing it from Nintendo's point of perspective, or POV, like, yeah,
I
POV,
think they
it makes
also
sense.
right. I think they'd also like to have some more fine-tuned control rather than just whacking the sledgehammer on things they
Yeah,
don't like,
yeah,
right? Because if they had more fine-tuned control and publicly placed out guidelines like this, and in case-by-case situations, like let's say license are case-by-case rules and not just a public rule set, like they might have a public rule set and that, right? Well, then it's a lot easier to say this is what went wrong, this is why this is happening, right? By actually building up an infrastructure to handle this, kind of like how IPL has an internal infrastructure to handle different tournaments and such, things can expand more, grow more, and be handled better. So if someone tries to go off and create a gargantuan tournament called Nintendo's official Splatoon World Championship, and then something horrible happens there, like I don't know, there's an entry fee of $10, and then the organizer runs with it or something,
yeah,
Nintendo can do something about that rather than just dealing with the extreme negative PR, right? They could just say, no, you can't call yourself that. And you have to run within the guidelines if they were violating something else, right? Um, it's too big or whatever. And if the organizer is, if it's suspicious or something, they could say no or something. I don't know, right? It's
yeah,
it all comes down to at its core, Nintendo's trying to protect itself. That's its big thing. Nintendo is trying to protect itself, in my opinion. Um, but if it does it right, if they do it right, then I think we can coexist in that regard, right? We can help each other out,
absolutely. It's
basically.
Yeah, we'll be able to have more of an on paper agreement on both party sides, how things can run and how things can pan out.
More clear communications, hopefully, right?
Yeah,
That would be nice.
absolutely. I mean, we've seen like a lot of players that get invited or even just go out to these, like, let's take the most recent, like, NA championship, right? Like, there are a lot of players that were invited out to help with production, commentate. The players themselves got, of course, earn their spot to compete. And even those players who went to be spectators, like, there were plenty of points where for players in the community to contact and just get in touch with Nintendo reps or their crews there that were able to put the whole event together, and one,
Mhm.
share what they know, and two, get to know each other, and see what both parties think about what's going on. As we're nearing our last couple of questions, the next one we have is, of course, going to be out there for the viewers, and so the players, the spectators, the watchers, the players in chat who only type when someone gets an amazing kill. Should they fear that these tournaments that they love playing in, both online and offline, but offline as an in person, um, should they have the fear that they might not be run anymore?
be
ran
run
different.
anymore.
Yeah, in a sense they
Well,
might
yeah,
be.
either of those, right?
Yeah, either of those. Like maybe not run
If
anymore
they
or
change or
differently.
get canceled, yeah. Should you? Potentially, right?
Mhm.
Again, this is a time of change. We don't know what's going to happen yet. Even the TOs don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? We're watching this like a hawk, obviously, and we're working together to make this work out the best we can. But we aren't Nintendo. We don't have the full playbook, and heck, Nintendo might not even have the full playbook. They have to, they're people too. They have to make changes and decide what to do based on feedback or whatever. So yeah, we all just have to work together as that goes. Now, do I think events are going to be canceled? IPL wise, no. Do I think outside of this? Not that I've heard of.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about events being canceled. Maybe like there was the consideration, like we're not currently planning to, but there was a consideration for a period of time. Do we just cancel Low Ink November if we can't get things done in time? And we said no. Let's look at other options if we can't run standard Low Ink in November, right? So we're looking at other options if that happens. But yeah. And that ties into the next point. Will events change? Yeah, likely events will change in some way. Now, again, if everything goes really well, it'll be minimal, but there will be changes, right? Because the license will stipulate various rules that we have to follow still. There is a change coming when November 15th passes, no matter what. The question is how much of that change will be there.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's going to be absolutely massive changes, right? Like the example I gave with Loic, if we wanted to maintain our existing size and format and all that under community tournament guidelines, we'd have to run a 5-day event because you can only have 300 people per day. We'd have to basically do Swiss Group A on like Monday and then B on Tuesday, etc. And that is a logistical nightmare to say the least, because it's the challenge of how do I balance each Swiss group and make sure people can actually play in their Swiss group.
Yeah.
That,
Like
as someone who's run Super Jump 1 and 2, where we had Wave A and B, there's a reason we don't have waves in Super Jump 3, and no plans to reintroduce that in Super Jump 4 when that happens in the far future. But yeah, we wouldn't really have much of a choice now, would we, if we wanted to run the existing format? Kind of a mess. So yeah, there likely to be changes in general for events that follow under community rules. Potentially some changes, more minor, to those that get licenses. But as for what those be, I couldn't tell you, right? You guys have access to the community rules, and UTOs do too, and if they're following those rules, you could probably get an idea of what they'd need to change. But even so, it really comes down to what, Nintendo decides in the end. Regardless, yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. I've already mentioned that IPL is going to be complying with community guidelines November 15th and later for all events, at least until we can get licenses, and then we'll be complying with the license rules. But yeah, can't really speak for other organizations. Still, I wouldn't be too concerned about that, right? Change is just change. Change is not bad always.
Yeah, change could be
Change might change a few things, but in the end, I think this will be overall good.
With that being one of our last very specific direct questions, I want to give you this time to basically say whatever you want to say, finish off whatever you'd like to get out there. Again, from the TO side of tournaments and of the TO side of the community, to those who play and watch many of the events that we love to compete and aimlessly stare into.
Yeah, overall, I think these changes are going to be a good thing for the scene. So these changes, these guidelines, are similar to other guidelines in other competitive communities, such as Riot Games guidelines for events like Valorant, very big competitive scene, right? They have guidelines like this too. This is kind of something that's standard and necessary for esports. So when we're thinking long-term for this community's growth, this is something that eventually had to happen, to be brutally honest. Obviously, Nintendo is a bit different, and we say it's a Nintendo moment when Nintendo does something right, because it always seems to be a bit different than others, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, right, from our perspective.
Yeah.
But even so, I do I'm going to be optimistic here. I think it's going to be a good thing. I think this overall is going to be more like a olive branch, a peace garland or whatever to Splatoon, trying to come in and help us grow. Right? That's the perspective I want to take on this. And, I could be wrong. I could be the opposite. Could be anywhere in between.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think, again, Nintendo's protecting their IP. Nintendo's going to try to help us grow, or allow us to grow, rather, under that control. Nintendo, after all, if Nintendo didn't want us to exist as a competitive scene, Nintendo could have just sent a bunch of cease and desist letters out instead of doing all this.
Yeah.
They could have just said, IPL, cease and desist, so we're done with no more competitive Splatoon tournaments, go away. Right? They could have just done that. We haven't received any cease and desist letters or anything like that. So yeah, they are at the very least okay with the competitive scene existing. They just want oversight over it, is what I'm getting from this. A couple other things here. As mentioned, there's going to be change. Some of it's not going to be fun, especially if licenses take a while to obtain. So I need each and every one of you to bear with us as TOs across the whole scene as we deal with these growing pains. Because for a time, right, Low Ink might have to be a small tournament or whatever events you participate in. We might have to figure out different unique ways of operating these events. So please do bear with us. Again, please don't take your anger out about this stuff on us, right? We're just trying to figure out the best way to handle it. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions or provide feedback, right? If we run a modified version of event to meet guideline requirements and you have feedback, please do feel free to drop that, right? Or just feedback in general. And you do not need to worry too much about asking questions, right? Like, we don't really have a lot of answers right now, right? So if you immediately following this video, I don't know when this is going to go out, right? But if, let's say this goes out within the next couple days and we don't have it and nothing's really changed. I mean, yeah, that's the hope here, because every day we wait, something major could change and a lot of this could be invalid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely tried to do that. But anyways, right? Assuming things are still the same, right? I don't really have anything to add. If you come to Low Ink Help Desk and ask me, Owen, how is Low Ink going to handle November? My answer is going to be, I can't tell you yet, because we're not ready to tell you.
Yeah.
And even if it was, right, okay, we do have a plan, right? We have a short-term and long-term plan, I can tell you that much. And yeah, again, feel free to ask questions, but I may not be able to tell you very much. The same goes for the other organizations. They may just look at you and go, I'm sorry, I don't know yet, or we can't say anything yet, because we do have to keep a lot of this stuff under wraps as we prepare for stuff, because we don't want to say, oh, we're going to do X big event, and then 3 days later, wait a minute, we need to change this. That's why we don't just announce everything immediately. We make sure things are in place first. It's pretty standard, because I cannot tell you guys how many iterations we go through when, for example, designing Superjump. We have several months lead time on designing events, right? In fact, I'll tangent here for a second. We get a number of requests for IPL to stream things, right? Here's the thing, though. IPL has a big focus on high quality production. So a lot of times people come to us say, hey, can you stream X event? And they'll have no graphics package or a very low quality one. We're like, okay, but we'll need to make one. We need 2-3 months lead time.
Yeah.
Because that's how long it can take to make that stuff. All the fancy streams you see, that is a lot of work, an enormous amount of work. So we need a lot of lead time. So if you're going to come and propose something to IPL, pitch an idea to us or something, ideally you give us a lot of lead time so we can work with you. Because being an organization this big, right, there's a lot of things we have to do, a lot of things we have to organize, and it may take quite a bit to get to something, even if we want to do it, right? But anyways, to get off that tangent, bear with us and work with us. I'm pretty sure everything will be perfectly fine, right? I'm not concerned about it. I'm just watching and waiting along with the rest of y'all for more information, whether that's public information or private information. When we have something to say and announce, we'll post it. If we get licenses, that's most certainly going on Twitter. But yeah, we'll let you know when we have more info, and no need to worry about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of that information and all the information you gave today in this interview. I just want to say a huge thank you for doing this and also just giving a sense of hope and direction and understanding that I think the community desperately needed. Because, to be honest, after Doomsday, I think things are still a little rocky for a lot of people, even though we are all just going crazy about the Splatfest results, right?
Yeah, Splatfest is a nice distractor. Thankfully, things like that will distract the problems for a while, and it probably won't flare up again until something happens. But until that happens, we don't know, right?
Exactly, absolutely. So,
But yeah,
thank you
happy
again.
to have helped.
And feel free, for those that are watching, where can they find you? Socials, Discords, whatever you'd like to shout out.
I am at HoeenHero on Twitter. If you'd like to contact me there, preferably usually it's the easiest way to do it is to contact me through Discord, which is also at HoeenHero. You can find me in the IPL public server, of course, if you need a server to be in with me. And if you can't find me, because I'm usually on invisible, so I don't get too many DMs, right? You can find my @ on the list of staff in the welcome and information channel there, right? Don't really stream much on Twitch, but I'm on there too, right? If that's ever applicable, like if we ever go, oh hey, we should have some big public discussion about stuff. I don't know, maybe we'd probably do that on IPL though, so yeah.
Absolutely,
But
gotta have the outline.
that would make more sense. That would make more sense. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like. Can't guarantee that I'll have an answer for you, or when I'll get to answering your question, because if I get a million questions from this, that'll take a bit. But yeah, at HoeenHero is pretty much what I use everywhere.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much, and hopefully you will not get bombarded. Hopefully everything that was asked and answered today is plenty for those watching. Once again, everyone, that was Hoeen. Thank you so much again for joining me on this interview.
Happy to have helped.
That's going to do it for this video. As I mentioned, this is one of 3 different interviews I had with tournament organizers. If there are any questions or concerns that you might have, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll be more than happy to try to give you an answer, if there is one available, for anything you might be worried about that wasn't clear in either these interviews or in the guidelines. See you in the next video.